August 6th, 1945. It's a date that literally changed the course of human history, all because of a weapon with just unimaginable power. So today, we're going to walk through what happened on that day and the days that followed to try and get our heads around one of the absolute darkest chapters of the 20th century. So let's set the scene. It's a summer morning in Hiroshima. The sky is blue, the sun's out, and people are just starting their day. You've got kids heading to school, people going to work. For all intents and purposes, it just felt like another day in a very long and difficult war.
But this sunrise, it was different. For thousands of people, it would be their last. In just a few hours, a whole city would be brought to its knees. And a new, absolutely terrifying age was about to be born.
So, how did this happen? To really grasp the shock of it all, we've got to go back to the moments right before the blast. The city was in this deceptive calm, a false sense of security. This was its last ordinary morning. You have to remember, life in Japan in 1945 was incredibly tough. The economy was just shattered. Think about it. Simple things we take for granted, like milk or coffee, had completely vanished from the shops. People were growing their own vegetables in schoolyards, anywhere they could, just to fight off hunger. And cars? Forget about it. With petrol shortages, the streets were just full of bicycles and pedestrians. It was a hard life, for sure, a life of scarcity. But it was still life. People were getting by. So that morning, just after 7 a.m., the air raid sirens go off. Everyone tenses up. A single American plane is spotted. But here's the thing. Japan's Air Force was so low on fuel, they couldn't even send up fighters to intercept it. So the plane just kind of looks around and leaves. By 8 a.m., the all-clear siren sounds. You can just imagine the city breathing this collective sigh of relief. The danger's past, right? Time to get back to the day. Well, just 15 minutes later, that calm was completely shattered. At 8:15 a.m., everything changed. Another lone plane shows up in the sky. It's a B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay. And the military on the ground, they make a fatal assumption. They figure, hey, it's probably just another reconnaissance flight like the one from earlier. So no sirens this time. The plane is just allowed to fly on, completely unchallenged, right toward the heart of the city. But of course, this wasn't a recon mission. This plane was carrying a 4-ton weapon, codenamed Little Boy. And this wasn't just another bomb. No way. This was the world's first atomic weapon ever used in war. A weapon designed, in the words of President Truman, to harness the very power of the universe. So at 8:15 a.m., Little Boy is released. It falls for 43 seconds, and then it detonates about 600 meters above the city. At its core, the temperature hit 10 million degrees Celsius. Just try to imagine that. The source material puts it in the only way that makes sense. It was as if the sun itself had just exploded on Earth. And in a single blinding flash, 30% of Hiroshima's population, an estimated 80,000 people, men, women, and children, were either vaporized or killed instantly. Just gone, in the blink of an eye. But for those who somehow survived that initial blast, the horror was, well, it was only just beginning. What came next was an aftermath so awful it can really only be described as hell on earth. Let's talk about Setsuko Thurlow. She was just a 13-year-old schoolgirl. Her words really bring you into that moment of pure terror. She said she saw a bright white light, and then everything just went black. When she finally came to, she was buried in rubble, and all she could hear were the screams of her classmates. And what's so horrifying is how consistent the stories from survivors are. They talk about staggering through a city that was just gone. They describe seeing people with skin literally hanging from their bodies, like, and this is the quote, a half-torn poster. And through all that devastation, there was one sound you could hear everywhere, a desperate, agonizing cry, water, water. And then came this just awful, cruel twist. It started to rain. But it wasn't normal rain. It was a black rain, thick with ash and dust, and all these deadly radioactive particles from the explosion. The survivors, so desperate for water, had no idea it was poison. They drank it, and many of them died in agony, sometimes within minutes. So who was the first person to get the word out? A journalist named Satoshi Nakamura. He was actually just outside the city when the blast knocked him flat on his back. He got up, grabbed his bicycle, and rode straight into that inferno. What he saw? It was beyond anything he could comprehend. And his first message to his news agency was just blunt and staggering. But the thing is, the outside world just couldn't process it. His editor on the phone, he flat out didn't believe him. Not possible, he said. One bomb can't do this. He told Nakamura the military didn't believe it either and ordered him to lower the casualty numbers in his report. The truth was just too big, too horrifying to be believed. Now imagine this. Nakamura, his face still bleeding from shattered glass, just screams back into the phone. His response really captures that huge gap between the people who saw it with their own eyes and everyone else who couldn't even imagine it. He knew what he saw. He had seen hell. And while Japan was still reeling, still trying to even understand what happened in Hiroshima, the unthinkable was about to happen again. Just 3 days later, the United States was ready to strike a second time.
So August 9th, another B-29 is in the air, and this one's carrying an even more powerful bomb. The primary target was a city called Kokura, but when the bomber gets there, the city is covered by clouds and smoke. The pilot can't get a visual, so he diverts to the secondary target. And just like that, because of a cloudy day, the fate of Nagasaki was sealed.
And this second attack, it was a major escalation. The bomb they dropped on Nagasaki was codenamed Fat Man. It was a plutonium bomb, and it was way more powerful than Little Boy, the one used on Hiroshima. Now, the hilly terrain around Nagasaki actually helped contain some of the blast, but even so, it instantly killed an estimated 74,000 people. The scenes on the ground in Nagasaki were just a horrific echo of what happened in Hiroshima. A nurse who survived, Sano Mueko, she talked about the unbearable horror of seeing children burning right in front of her and said their cries still echo in her ears. The human cost, once again, was just catastrophic.
So these two attacks, with a destructive power nobody had ever seen before, they did bring an end to the deadliest war in human history. But they also left a permanent scar on the world, a legacy of fire that honestly still haunts us to this day.
This was the endgame. You have two cities devastated by atomic bombs. Then, on August 8th, the Soviet Union declares war on Japan. It was the combination of these things that left Japan's leaders with no other choice. 6 days after Nagasaki, on August 15th, Japan announced its unconditional surrender. World War II was officially over. But the stories of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they're so much more than just history. They force us, all of us, to face a really profound and unsettling question. On the one hand, some people argue that these weapons have kept a sort of fragile peace for over 75 years through deterrence. But on the other hand, many see them as a ticking clock, a threat that could literally destroy humanity. So the question is still out there. Are these weapons a symbol of peace or the cause of our future destruction? It's something we all have to think about.